Hey Scrubs, this is Retro with a video on the combat mods I use in my 400 plus mod series. I chose these mods as I found they added depth and weight to Skyrim's clunky vanilla combat and were also very fun to use. Let's get right on with the show. Smildon by Enai Sian. Smildon is a lightweight combat mod that changes the pace of combat in a big way. It increases the damage you deal and that NPCs deal to you, and I like to set the difficulty to adept, which means I deal 1.5 times the normal damage and so do NPCs. I didn't really like the way Bethesda handled difficulty in vanilla Skyrim combat, just reducing the damage you output while ramping up the damage NPCs can put out. It feels artificial and gamey, and on top of that it takes away from the enjoyment of combat. But with Smildon, the increased damage makes each engagement feel more punchy, as one wrong move could have big repercussions as the bad guys put you in a dumpster. Smildon also makes it so that a normal melee swing costs 10 stamina and a heavy attack costs 15 stamina. Block bashing has had its stamina cost reduced greatly. Smildon adds an attack of opportunity system and also a stagger system so that if certain actions are performed, whoever is performing them is vulnerable to increased damage. For example, if a bandit was drawing a bow and you landed a hit, they would take an extra 50% damage. Alternatively, if you block an incoming attack just as it's about to connect, the opponent is staggered and will take an extra 25% damage. All of these options are configurable through a Smildon power added to the player, and I like to keep all of the default settings and also enabling burst staggers, which staggers enemies when they receive 30% or more damage in one hit. Next on the list is Combat Gameplay Overhaul by D-Servant. This mod breathes new life into the rigid vanilla combat and also adds in some new animations. The mod expands naturally on the depth of Skyrim's combat with tweaks that could easily be features in new Elder Scrolls entries. Finally, you can use two-handed weapons, one in each hand. Finally, you can wield a single sword but grip it with both hands to increase its damage and speed and utilize your two-handed skill. It comes with a dodge roll that has iframes, or it can use a set amount of stamina, which can also be used by your enemies, and a hotkey for blocking whilst dual wielding or casting. Combat Gameplay Overhaul also features procedural leaning, which gives the impression of weight to your character as they move, and the mod also allows you to strike, cast and shoot while airborne. It looks amazing. All of the features in Combat Gameplay Overhaul are customized in the mod configuration menu, so you can change how much your character leans, whether NPCs get dodge roll, how much speed reduction you get if dual wielding two-handers, how much damage a one-handed sword gets as a bonus if it's used at a two-handed grip style. It's very extensive and it's very impressive. Archery Gameplay Overhaul, also by D-Servant. In the same vein as the previous mod, Archery Gameplay Overhaul changes up ranged combat substantially and makes you feel like a Robin Hood badass and not a screeching child at a soft range. The mod adds in some really nice animations for knocked arrows when archers are idle, and they mirror the new depth found in the previous mod. Archery Gameplay Overhaul adds one of my favourite new features to the game, persistent arrows. As you get pelted with arrows, they will stay embedded in your character until you press a hotkey to manually remove them. This leads to some awesome thematic moments when you finally dispatch your last enemy and you soak in the carnage, only to realise you have several arrows still stuck in your chest. The arrows are persistent for enemies too, and compared to vanilla, in which the arrows would disappear after a short time or if there are too many in one character, this mod helps create a very cinematic experience for any archer character. The mod also improves the third-person camera while using a bow and adds bleeding to all arrows and bolts. However, I would recommend you disable the bleed effect from this mod, as I have a mod on the list that has the most configurable bleed effect I've discovered. Arrow and Bolt Tweaks by Kevcast. This mod increases the speed at which arrows and bolts and even right-click spears travel in the game. This makes the arrows and bolts much more of a threat, and at lower levels I find myself skirting around rocks and trees trying to dodge arrows as they can be fatal. On top of that, it increases the depth of bolts, meaning that if you shoot a crossbow into someone's chest, the bolt will sink in deeper. This mod comes in multiple flavours and can be configured for extra damage or different speeds, but I like to go with the main preset of plus 50% speed and normal damage, as I find with 100% extra arrow damage and bolt speed, groups of low-level bandits basically take my lunch money. Arrow Retrieval System Overhaul by Seb263. This mod is fully configurable and allows you to collect as many arrows off of corpses as you want, as well as being able to set arrows that miss enemies to unbreakable so you can always go and retrieve them. As well as this, it also adds a feature that will collect arrows within a few meters of you when you pick up any arrow. This mod is personal preference, but with the persistent arrows mod, it drove me crazy seeing 5 or 6 arrows on a dead bandit that I couldn't take and reuse. The mod also has functions for arrows to break and be repairable by blacksmiths, but I don't use this feature. Bleed Them Dry by Leslie123. This mod rocks. It's fully customizable and enables bleed effects over time for each weapon type. When I say fully customizable, I do mean fully. If you want extra bleed on arrows and daggers and less bleed on blunt weapons such as maces and hammers, you can do just that. There are 7 presets made by the mod author if you don't feel like tweaking the settings yourself. You can also tweak the amount of bleed and duration of the bleed effect for each weapon type. The bleed effect stacks, and so if you set it up right, you can apply bleeds on an enemy with daggers and then stay out of their way and watch them bleed to death. The mod also adds several customization options for the bleed effect, such as not allowing the AI to get passive healing whilst in combat if they're bleeding. This was a big bugbear of mine when I first started playing Skyrim, as I found enemies constantly passively healing at low health. They can still heal with restoration spells and potions, but no more easy past second wins. Finally, you can enable a visual bleed effect on NPCs and yourself and control the rate at which the effect spurts blood onto the floor and what colour the blood is. Honourable Mentions: Vigor, Blood and Guts, and Ordinator. Ordinator is a complete perk overhaul and makes the perks feel more useful as you gain far more new, interesting abilities and passives compared to vanilla perks. Ordinator will probably have its own video on my channel at some point. The reason I reference it here is that the combat perks from Ordinator pair nicely with this combat mod setup. With my combat mod setup, daggers already cause bleed. Paired with Ordinator, they can inflict extra bleed if you take the right perks and flesh out combat in interesting ways. Vigor, Blood and Guts adds injuries to both the player and NPCs, and the injuries can cause massive blood loss which lead to death. I enjoyed this one an awful lot, but with all the other mods on the list, the damage was so high that I'd be seriously crippled after every fight. However, I may add it back into the load order in the future so I can snipe bandits' legs out from under them. It's a very cool mod. Well, that's it for my combat mods. Let me know in the comments which of these, if any, you're planning on using. Give me your likes and subscribe if you're new here. Thanks for watching. Peace.